So Ahmed, what do employees need to really understand here and be aware of, in terms of someone who's been laid off already or, maybe laid off in the future? How does EB-5 potentially fit into that equation, and what benefit does it provide to someone in that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the key parts of this entire question is, what is your status at the time that you lose your job? And really, how much time do you have to fix that? Like, do you fall out of status immediately? Are you able to get a new H-1B employer? Well, what if you have an I-140 that's already approved? And the answer basically is that, there's different ways to look at when your employment ends. And I think that speaking to an immigration attorney is really important at this stage, right? Knowing, okay, this is the date that I'm receiving my last paycheck. Here's maybe the last day that I completed work. The immigration attorney will be able to look at all those factors and tell you, okay, this was your last date of employment. And once you've lost that job, you are officially into what's called a grace period. Now, technically, this is a 10-day grace period, but historically, this has basically been extended to about 60 days under discretion. And I think that's a key part of this whole equation, is that although we've seen that, in the past where it's been extended, kind of just wrote everyone who's in this kind of situation is just expected a 60-day grace period. The current administration has been cracking down on pretty much every aspect of the immigration process. That 60 days could very well be interpreted as just 10. And so this grace period, what does it allow you to do? The first thing is that it allows you to stay in the United States. And the second thing is it gives you this 60-day window to then go out and find another employer. If you've got an I-140 approved, it doesn't really help you in this situation. You still have to go out and get an employer to basically hire you and sponsor you for a new H-1B application. Now, you can file this H-1B application on the 59th day as long as it's received by USCIS before that 60 days are up. You're going to be able to remain in the US and kind of switch over to your new H-1B employer, or change of employer as we call it. But let's just say that now you've looked for jobs, you're on your 60th day, you haven't found anyone to sponsor you. At this point, you would technically have to either leave the US or find another way to remain. And another way to remain might be a change of status to a B1, B2. If your spouse has an active H-1B, you could switch over to an H-4. If you're going back to school, you could switch over to an F1. There's a lot of different strategies that I've seen used over the last few months, but probably the kind of really clever solution, if you've got the funding for it, is to use EB-5. And there's two big benefits to using an EB-5 application at this point, where you don't have basically a chance to get another H-1B employer and sponsor you. And Sam, we can actually go to the next slide. So the first thing that I'll say is EB-5 has a special protection. We didn't actually list it here because you definitely should talk to an immigration attorney about this. But one of the kind of hidden advantages that the RIA added to the EB-5 category was a 245K protection. And 245K is basically a rule that allows people who are in the US to adjust even if they have some time spent out of status or some time spent basically working without authorization. And that is, for this particular situation, such a key advantage. And the rule basically is that as long as you've been out of status for less than 180 days, or maybe you've got some kind of other things that would normally put you into a period of unauthorized stay or start accruing unlawful presence, as long as you've got less than 180 days of that, EB-5 in a lot of ways fixes that issue. So the first kind of crazy benefit that EB-5 offers is that you are going to be able to, even if you go past that 60 days, it's not ideal. I don't think any immigration attorney is going to advise you to just flippantly go past those 60 days. But in a pinch, let's say you ended up at 90 days or 120 days after your H-1B employment ended, EB-5 can actually help fix that problem for you with a filing of an adjustment. Okay, and that brings us to point number one, which is if you're in the US, you can immediately, on filing a 526E petition, which is the EB-5 application, also be able to file an adjustment of status. And this will automatically give you status in the US. If you filed your adjustment of status on a Monday, it's received by USCIS on Tuesday. On Tuesday, you are now effectively in status in the United States, in a status that's called adjustment pending. Okay, so the one big advantage of EB-5, while the bulletin is current, is that you're going to be able to file a 485 alongside your 526E petition and immediately gain a secondary status in the United States. We can't emphasize this enough, but step one of hiring an attorney is as important a step as you're going to have in this whole entire process. Not only is hiring an attorney important so that they can guide you correctly on all the different immigration ins and outs, laying out all the different options in front of you so that you can kind of consider all the different options that you have and make an informed decision. But EB-5 has become very popular over the last 2 years. It's very common to speak to an immigration attorney who does EB-5 work, especially the ones who do them at a high volume, and realize that they are backed up for a couple of weeks before they're even going to be able to kind of look at your documentation and start putting it all together. And so the sooner that you reach out to an attorney, the sooner that you get to work on your source of funds with them, the less stress you're going to have as you approach your 60-day grace period ending to make sure that your application gets filed in a timely manner, right? So you can see this green bar on the third row down. Like, it does take some time to select the right EB-5 project. It does take some time. The bottleneck often ends up being source of funds paperwork. Everyone always thinks their source of funds is extremely clean and very easy to document. I can tell you from having filed over 1,000 cases in my lifetime that it's never easy, even when it's just coming from RSUs that were granted by your company. You know, people don't realize that there's also a medical exam that you have to schedule and go to the doctor's office and get done. Nowadays, the USCIS is requiring wet signatures on forms, so they have to be snail mailed there and back. You know, there's all these different little nuances and steps, and that's why you need an attorney to guide you, and it does take time. So the sooner you can speak to an attorney, kind of to Mike's point, like, maybe don't be reactionary and wait to get laid off before you start taking these steps. Kind of read the room, or in this case, read the market, understand where you are in that market, and be a little bit more proactive instead of reactive. Choosing that attorney kind of earlier on, or at least speaking with one and having a general idea of the lay of the land and what options there are for you, is a really great way to put yourself in a position to succeed.
So when it comes down to the EB-5 process, you could think of it as there's two main things that have to happen for this to be successful. One is completely dependent on you as an investor, which is your source of funds has to be clean, and you have to be able to prove it to the government to be approvable. The other half is about the project. Both, is the structure approvable, and then does it create the jobs? So as you're looking at different projects, we tend to like projects where we're not trying to do something too clever. It's very simple, approvable projects that have been done many times before, primarily real estate, for sale, home construction in rural areas is what we've been focused on for now. And if you have the experience that we do, where we've structured hundreds of deals that have been approved by USCIS over the years, over 20 projects just since the RIA passed. We have over 20 956F approvals. But as you're looking for a regional center in a project, finding a project that's pre-approved or a prior phase is approved with the exact same structure is important to know that you're not going to have any problems on that side. And finding one that is already well under construction with no permitting, entitlement, environmental risk is key, because again, for you to get your green card and become permanent, as long as the project is approved and the jobs are created and your source of funds is there, you have a direct line to getting the benefit that you seek. And we have some people that want to get a little clever and invest in operating businesses and do things where there's a little bit higher rate of return and more equity upside. You're just mixing together too many different things, where the core purpose of the EB-5 investment is get the green card in a secure way, keep that money safe and get it back. And it's important to work with a regional center that has a long track record of doing just that, and projects that are structured in a way that comply with the current laws.